Michael, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I'm happy to be back. Nice
Yeah,
to see you
man.
again.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
So for the audience, Michael's got a fantastic room here.
We put a lot into the room. That was,
Oh, yeah.
again, that goes, I mean, we've talked about this 1,000 times, but the room is where you make your decisions. Your room and my room don't have to be this. There is no that's the thing about rooms being, there's no standard for them. We just need what we need out of them to make decisions. You need to hear what you need to hear, and out of it to make our decisions. It's like that, it's like that saying that if you're on the wrong train, every stop's the wrong stop. All your decisions are made by your perception. If your perception is off, so are your decisions.
Yeah.
So the rooms are very particular and personal.
Yeah.
I definitely say personal.
Oh, and we talked about it in the last episode, and I think that this room is really, truly you from what I know of you. And I've known you now, I think 24, 25 years.
I think so, yeah.
In this room, you do Atmos work, and you've won some Grammys for it, which are over here to my left, your right. And so let's talk a little bit about Immersive as a whole and some of our thoughts about the good, the bad, the ugly, and maybe looking ahead towards the future to see like what's on the horizon. What could we expect? So you've been at the game of surround a long time. And I think we even may have talked about that in the past, where I remember when you were doing 5.1 stuff and I just never saw the point of it.
We talked about this a lot. I remember, I think probably maybe for a decade or 15, I've been trying to like, Matt, you need to get in.
You need to get right. You need to check this out. And I'm always just like, yeah, that's bullshit.
Ain't gonna happen. It's never gonna be a thing.
Yeah, right.
No,
and then it wasn't
be.
until Atmos that I came around to, came surround to the.
Well,
sorry, I was trying to make a clever joke there.
You're coming back in from the backside or the third dimension or the Z-axis. Until we had a very, it's not the most resolute version of distribution, but until we had a reliable way to distribute it without huge expense or physical product like Blu-rays and stuff like that, it wasn't really practical. So we finally got into a spot. So, your time back then would have just been, playing, exploratory, learning, getting into it a bit, and R&D to get to now. Yeah, I think the first room, Paul and I at Coast on Mission Street, when we took over that building and had Coast recorders in the back and then the two mastering rooms up front, and we made 5.1 rooms out of both of those, and that was
prior to me coming into the building.
That was 2001. That was prior to you coming into the building. It was like because you came in
2006, 7.
Yeah, because we had because we did business. We had like a 5-year lease, and then I took over the lease for another 5 years. At that point for that, and you came in right at the spot of that one. Yeah.
Right during the financial crisis.
Right.
Hey, Matt, come on over.
Man, that building is still, anybody's looking for a studio, that building is still sitting there. That was one of the best tracking rooms. Like that was a Bill Putnam room in the back. Between George Horn and Bill Putnam putting that room together for Mercury.
Yeah.
It was just, it's still fantastic. We did all those live at Coast shows and stuff. Like it just sounded great in there.
Well, so on this immersive front, there's Dolby Atmos, there's the Sony 360 stuff,
Oro 3D, Ambisonics,
which I actually Oro 3D I just have not paid any attention to. So we may have to have a post interview conversation about that.
Let's do an audio nerds night on the one of our listening nights.
That's what we should do. But we also hear Google and Samsung are working on an open source thing. I can only imagine others are too. So do you think that the Atmos thing, the immersive thing, just multiple speakers surrounding us will continue to work its way forward in some fashion?
Regardless of the format.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely do. As you know, I've been a proponent of this for a while, but I am because for one, I can see it coming, but the other is I'm a fan of it. Done right, done wrong, it's hard to listen to, and it's you got to question yourself sometimes. Just because we can with a classic record, for example, should we? There are some artistic and practical choices. But as a whole, I think we're definitely going forward with this. I mean, on so many levels, even just look at AR and VR, what enhanced audio localization does for the experience for anything else, which is in our world, today, games and movies and stuff like that, not even future concerts or future experiences, it is much larger than the music industry. So if we look at music being able to adapt to this in that sense of experience and engagement and being wrapped around, it's going to be a more smooth transition. It's going to be better adopted by the consumers and music fans. Your point about formats is great. In your thought about dimensionality, we will be doing 3-dimensional audio moving forward in some fashion somehow. I think regardless what format that takes or what we call it, whether it's Atmos or Auro 3D or Sony 360 or IAMF or Ambisonics or a handful of others that are still out there now and will be in the future. The best thing we can do as engineers and liaisons with the artist is best practices. Serve the song, serve the music. Let the formats will figure themselves out. Some will be more distributable. It'll be like beta and VHS. The best one didn't win, but we sorted it out. It became a thing. We sort of societally agreed on something. Whatever format shakes, in the future, multiple ones that we have, it's still going to be up to us to help guide our clients, the people that we work with, the creative folks, into their best presentation of their music. And so understanding the formats, I think, is a huge thing. And so one of the things that we can do best is to learn as much as we can about them and play and try and share. We do our listening events. I bring people over here once a month and we just sit and share songs and talk about them. I think that's one of the best things we can do to help, kind of educate, because, when you've got clients, somebody comes to you and go, hey man, I want to do a record with you. And you go, hey, have you thought about this? Okay, let's talk about the process and what do you want to release? And, you go, well, have you thought about Atmos? And they go, I don't know. What is that? And so here's you to educate. You now become the spokesmodel
or spokesperson.
Spokesperson.
Yeah.
Well, spokes engineer.
I like to think I'm a model, but
I think you're a model in so many ways, Matt.
I don't want to bring us down here, but I still to this day, I don't even bother responding to these people because it just seems like a childish response when I see, oh, this is just a big money grab, or this is I don't know what some of the other things they've said.
It's like a bandwagon to jump on for now, get what you can before it goes away kind of stuff.
Right. And it's just like when people say that, I just think everybody is selling something. It's the capitalist society that we've chosen to live in. Well, we live in it, whether we choose it or not. And I just don't understand why they think that is different and special to be given this derogatory money grab concept in comparison to all the other
money grab concepts
that are out there. It's like, really? That's what you're going to pick on?
What's YouTube?
Right. What's any of this
stuff? What's Facebook? It's all money grab. I mean, it's visibility and income and stuff. And so if somebody's putting out their record like that, great. If somebody's, learning as an engineer who's been doing, mono, stereo, whatever for years, and somebody says, hey, I want you to get in, you don't have to say, I want to get into this.
Right.
But you can. And if you choose to, great. And know that this is going to be moving forward a little bit. But, yes, there's work. There, as I see, it's not a money grab. It's more of a, I don't want to say staking your claim, but it's building your reputation and starting for something that I think is, we're now teaching it in schools. There's lots of universities are teaching it. Mm-hmm. We're getting into now, artists are more educated. So they're not necessarily looking at their past records. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Their past records, because they were written, produced, conceived, recorded, all of that for stereo. But what about the opportunities moving forward? And this is what we were, started to touch on a minute ago, is regardless of the format, the opportunity for creativity moving forward. is huge and awesome, and it won't change. We will be in a 3-dimensional audio space moving forward. Devices, phones, we're moving to a device compliant. Like devices are going to be are content aware, more so than ever. And moving forward, a device will go, oh, you've got this thing that's doing it. We can do that. You're playing these speakers, but this file's coming in. Okay, cool. Here's what we're going to do. And so it behooves us as creative folks to create the most universally listenable, translatable, and as best as possible representation of that art, of that song.
One thing that disturbs the living shit out of me is these stories. In fact, I had a conversation with a fellow engineer on LinkedIn the other day, and he was sharing with me that even major labels are pushing back and saying, yeah, we can get this done at a reputable place. We can get Atmos mixes done for $125, under $200. And that disturbs me.
That totally disturbs me.
But then I see you doing work on, some pretty high level stuff, and people are putting money into that. So I'm trying to figure out, like, where are people getting cheap and where are people willing to spend money?
Yeah.
On that level.
Well, excellent point. I'm fortunate enough. A lot of the folks I work with are able to go back to the original catalog, go back to the 2-inch tape if it's a catalog record, if it's a new record. Like I've done a couple with Chuck Ainley this year. He recorded, I guess it was last year, a Lyle Lovett record, recorded from scratch for Immersive first, stereo was secondary. We did a George Strait record, same thing. So I'm seeing that they're capturing and thinking about the process moving forward. Some artists and some labels are recognizing the value of what this means moving forward, that there's a catalog or there's a body of work history that one is building as an artist. And everything you do is part of that. And they don't want to put out anything that doesn't represent them completely. And so if they're going to do it, they're going to dig in and do it right. I think we could be a little more future-sighted when folks are putting stuff out, realizing that if a label takes something that they own, so back to your question on that is brand new format. It's an investment. It's time, it's money, it's paying engineers, it's the studio, it's all that kind of stuff. For a label to say, hey, is this going to be something that is this going to be profitable for us in the future? Is this going to be a format that we're going to have to pay attention to? You don't want to put all your money on the table. Some do, but you want to go let's just go all in and do everything. Let's test it out. Let's figure it out. We already own this content. Let's just get it out there and see if it goes. If this becomes a form, if this becomes a real thing, if this isn't 3D TV and it goes on longer than a few years, and it gets into this kind of stuff, then maybe, then we're doing new records moving forward like that. So it's a minimal investment on a side that owns the content already. The unfortunate part with some of that is that the artists aren't always, and maybe it's because of the contracts they, negotiated or however, do they have say of how their content gets used? Folks I've been thankful enough and fortunate enough to work with have in their contracts, we own this and this doesn't go out unless we say that this in a certain way. So, there's a power in the artist, power in the label, marketing considerations. Is it worth the investment? Is it long-term? Is it to get it out there? Is it just to get people to go great, we're doing some of these other kind of back catalog stuff, but this is to get you to go, great, now moving forward, we'll do this, but then the artist goes, great, I'm going to work on this new record. We're going to start from scratch and we're going to do it this way. Then it's worth putting the investment in because they've seen that there's been some interest in their catalog. So there's a whole bunch in there.
So really, it in many cases, the situations that get the best treatment on the audio front, would you say it's because the artist has control, lines in the contract to state, they get to approve, whereas I don't want to name artists because that'll potentially alienate some people, but
right.
There's some bands that are near and dear to my background that I love, that even I shut the Atmos mix off for certain songs because I'm like, you hit play and you're like, oh, this one's in Atmos. Oh, it's not good.
Yeah.
Oh my God, how disappointing.
And that experience right there is why we always have to put our best foot forward. If that right there, if the experience of a record that you're a fan of, a song or an album or an artist you're a fan of, and you listen to that, and that experience is not good for you, you're going to go back to the stereo. It's what you know, it's what feels good, it's what you became a fan from in the first place. So we have to put our best foot forward to make that an experience that wants people to embrace it and move forward. Two things is, maybe it shouldn't have been in the first place, or maybe somebody didn't put their whole effort into it. But maybe, to your point, the artist didn't have a say and weren't involved in it.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole nother problem that is completely out of most people's control, except the artist can, always.
The bummer of this is that the fans don't know that the artist isn't in control. So if they hear something that's kind of, not as to the standard that they're used to listening to something, a particular record, and it doesn't fall up to that, they're going to poo-poo it and say, well, that was a crappy job with that, or I'm not going to listen to that. I like this other version. But they may not know the backstory, that it may have been something that was out of their control. The artist didn't have any say. They couldn't hire anybody. They had no creative control. Mm-hmm. As you well know, one of the edicts, of early deliverables from labels has been spread the stems. There's a soapbox. Spread the. I just did. I got a backpack of them. I'm trying to be careful.
Pull them out.
Pulling
One
them
at a
out.
time.
Right? It's like a quiver of soapboxes. The other path, the edict of labels and deliverables has been when spreading the stems, when getting the files from the deliverables that the label has required, don't venture far from the original mix. The idea is that you want to keep it about as close as you can as the same. So when somebody puts on binaural or spatial and they're listening to it, that it doesn't fundamentally sound any different than the stereo mix. It's just bigger. But I disagree with that. And so there's so many reasons not to. Certainly the creativity side of things. What are the opportunities for creativity with that? But to that is then it's not really challenging to back to that point. It's not really challenging the listener to take them into a new realm and say, this is the artist's real. Listen to all the creativity they put in. Hear all these pieces and parts that built this up, or feel what they were feeling when they did this. It's just like, well, this is the same thing. It's just now it's over here rather than here. And is it worth it to anybody? Especially the fans who don't know, right?
The widget mentality of the major label record industry sometimes continues to baffle me.
Yeah.
And then you look at situations like, look at somebody like Peter Gabriel. There's a dude that couldn't decide between Spike Stent and Chad Blake and puts out two separate stereo mixes, and then has Hans Martin Buff do the Atmos mix, which even in itself has some subtle differences in content. And, I've talked to Hans about it. The box set of Blu-ray and 2 CDs is a hot seller in Europe.
Yeah. Physical media.
Oh, yeah, that's soapbox. Right. Essentially, the major label record industry, there's some short-sighted people in that industry. There always has, there always will be. I guess it's up to us as audio professionals to, choose our battles and
right.
do the best we can where we can get involved and where we're allowed to express, because let's face it, there's always going to be some dude who doesn't get it up there, air quotes,
right,
for those listening, who just grabs the intern and says, here, toss these things around in the renderer and
right.
make something. And then that person doesn't even realize, oh, there's metadata in the binaural and different ways this can be presented. And that's where we get crap.
I mean, I've had people send me stuff to mix. I got into this. I had to learn to mix in this as well. And I mean, that's how we'll talk about the origin story and build my way to mastering. So,
right.
But in the mixing, I still do mixes, and I've had labels send me stuff to mix, and I have done creative things with it, like taking the stems and softening them a bit or EQing them a little bit so they feel more like a guitar, more like a vocal, go in and do those things that we do and have it rejected because it didn't sound enough like the other. It was too good. And I mean, in that sense, but it was too different and too engaging from a three-dimensional standpoint than the stereo was. And the label was like, no, we need it to be more like this. Just don't do anything to it. Just move stuff around. And that's just disheartening.
Well, and so that seems to be part of the issue.
It's a missed opportunity.
Like in the days of when Blu-ray was, more prevalent than it is now, those could be separate independent releases that didn't depend on, quote unquote, beating the stereo.
Right.
And now the way Apple Music is operating, or even Amazon for that matter, with, I don't know if you know that app, you can swipe back and forth between the different formats. There's that ABC comparison of here it is in stereo, here it is in Atmos, here it is in Sony 360, and you can compare and contrast for better or for worse. But if we deviate in catalog work too far from the stereo, then people flip, which I get.
When you buy, okay, so we talked about this, like that Replacements, Tim record, when that came out. New mix, Ed did it. I did the Atmos.
Ed Stasium,
and I did the mastering for it. But all of the other, like the outtakes, any of those kinds of box sets where you have, as a fan of, like, say, the Replacements, as the outtakes, as the alternate versions, people eat that up. People want those extra bits. Look at all the Beatles things that have, different versions of stuff, the different versions of everything that's out there. Why not take the immersive and approach it from a standpoint of extra or also or different, and not having to be, the same ingredients on a plate, just rearranged a different way. Like if you're presenting food or something, why not be something creatively different? Allow it to show, it takes, for the same reason that making an Atmos mix out of a stereo set of stems is the same reason to me that a good Atmos mix will never fold down to stereo. The same way somebody who knows how to mix stereo can make a good stereo mix. The algorithms will never make those creative decisions, nor could they, because they're personal and they're individual. And yes, it might be functional to say these frequencies effectively are flat and balanced and the dynamics are, but is it musical? And that takes somebody making, that's humans making decisions. Don't get me on the AI band. I get sucks. That's not music, and that's not mastering, and that's
I don't want to trigger you.
Yeah. I'll just But the for the same reason. So why not let it be different? Doing the Fantastic Negrito record, I thought it was awesome working with him. I think maybe we talked about this, but I reached out to him. I was like, man, I really love your record. This is really cool. I think this would make a great Atmos record. And he goes, man, that's awesome. What is that? And I said, okay, come over and let me play you some stuff. And so we spent about 2 hours playing music. And I just was like, well, what do you think? Here's classical, there's jazz, here's 10th Row Symphony, here's Flaming Lips stuff just moving all over the place, or Primus, fun. You know those records. Those are awesome. And or XTC, or like just fun stuff. And then I said, well, let's talk about your record. What would you like to do? And he says, well, I already have the stereo. Do whatever you want. And I love that, because it was like, here's an artist just saying, I created all of these sounds and things, but this one way to put it together because of this one presentation is a way, but it's not the way, or there are other ways to show off the creativity and the message of the song and the, communication. So I love that they're different. I'd like to see us bifurcate and just go like, let's just make different records.
Yeah. Well, I might be shooting myself in the foot for any future work, but as time goes along, I really see the value in operating outside the major label industry for a lot of artists. The band camps of the world provide a lot of value to a lot of independent artists, as does immersiveaudioalbum.com.
Yes.
Because there's an avenue for Atmos and other surround formats where it can exist without the preconditions that are set forth by Apple to have, the timing exactly just like the stereo, and the pressure from the major label record industry to make it sound exactly like the stereo.
Right.
So it can live in its own medium in the form of a download, just like the Blu-rays could exist outside of
Right.
that world.
I wish something. So you touched on something, is that we also have to realize we're in V1.2 or something. Like, we're still figuring this out. We're still immersiveaudioalbum.com is awesome because you and I hear full res files in our studios all day long. Man, I wish the consumers could hear what we hear. Wouldn't it be, if they could hear what we hear, they'd freak out the same way that we freak out when something's really good, or appalled when it's really bad, like, because you can tell, right? We're still in that phase where we're figuring out how to get it to people. We're educating them on what to listen to and how to listen to. They're still processing it themselves and sort of figuring it out. That's a whole other soapbox to go down, the idea of, most people listening in headphones and HRTFs and, personalized listening. And so, like, we're still figuring out how the brain perceives and how to do localization and 2-channel playback, and binaural or spatial or ambisonics or any of those things. I call it the MySpace phase. We're still
Right.
We're still in we haven't gotten to Facebook yet.
Yeah.
When nobody thought that we would ever, like, MySpace would ever be supplanted. We're still figuring this out. We haven't gotten to V2.0 yet, and which is great because we're putting a ton of work in the academic world, in the codec world, in the creative world, the production world, the artist's expression world.
All the tools that are getting
all
built.
The tools. Think about things that have to, just even things with low noise floor, because you're being additive. Think about a, ambisonics mic. If it's got a noise floor to it and you use 20 versions, like, you've added a lot of noise. Like, so we have to pay attention to things. We're still developing. There's a whole open world for virtual instruments of what you could do with 16 channels, like a synthesizer that did cool stuff. Or, like, just imagine the tools. Like, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Which is fun. And it's up to us. I'll just, again, back to that bandwagon, soapbox, whatever. It's up to us to help establish the best practices. Because right now is the foundation we build 2.0 on. So us as communicators with our artists, we deal with the labels. We also deal with the artists. We're the go-between and liaisons, and we have to help educate. And yes, it takes time, and yes, it takes a lot of research and practice and stuff for us and producers, engineers to do that. But if we want to see a future that is made organically and done expressively and creatively, we have to take on that burden to be able to establish the fundamentals.
And I'll complain again about pricing in that, it's fine. Like, we don't have to necessarily be exorbitant in what we charge, but what really just irks the shit out of me is when, like, here's an example, airgigs.com. I've got an account up there, and it's essentially a gig economy type thing.
I actually don't know that.
It's almost like, there's Sound Better, there's Air Gigs, there's Fiverr. I know Fiverr has this perception that it's like, everything's $5. It's not the case. But Air Gigs in particular,
it's 3 fivers.
Right, it's 3 fivers. Air Gigs in particular has some people on there selling Atmos services for so cheap. It's like, how are they doing that? Are they doing that on headphones? Are they just trying to, I won't buy any speakers. I'll just do it all on headphones and do it really quick and dirty. And I feel that.
Oh man, you can tell when somebody does it on headphones and never listen to it on speakers.
Oh, you could totally tell.
You can totally, and they don't know that. And like, here, as soon as you said that, sorry, my brain went straight to something I saw the other day. It was one of these guys driving around in a car with every kind of car paint they could be, looking for somebody with a dent. And they go find them and they go say, I'll pull out your dent and I'll paint you right here for $100 on the, and so they
in the parking lot. Yeah.
It's slap on some Bondo, quick rub it down, quick sand it down. It's rough as hell. It's a bad paint job, but it doesn't look smashed in. Like, it's done, but it's not good. there's who's running around doing this stuff.
So same.
That's exactly what they're doing. Is they're just bondoing it and spray painting it and calling it done and just taking a buck. This is that cash grab you're
That's
talking
a
about.
money grab right there.
That's the cash grab. Exactly right. And so know who you're working with. I mean, it behooves us as, as artists or as anybody who's doing that is also to, choose the people you work with. Find out something about them. Don't just take because they promote the crap out of themselves in social media. It doesn't mean they necessarily know what they're doing.
That is, you really hit the nail on the head there. That is the money grab right there. Because there's those of us who have invested and researched and put our time in and gone to event and trainings and met people and talked to each other.
And failed with mixes and then redid them and learned from them and made them better. And
right.
You have to trip sometimes.
And these other people are I'll just get a pair of headphones and the renderer and I'll toss it together.
Yeah. I'll take the stems, pay me $100 an hour. I'll do 2 records a day and spread those stems out. They're not challenging the listener. They're not costing anybody, the label or anybody, anything. But what they are doing is costing the artist the reputation about their body of work. They're costing us who pays attention, because then we're lumped in with people's bad experiences. As the consumers go, well, that was crappy. I don't listen to that. That was really bad. And we go, well, wait, listen to what we did. We put a lot of time in that. Nah, the format's kind of, jacked. I'm not really into it or whatever. But, well, you only listen to these things that are, listen to something good and then see about it.
I would love to get in a time machine and go back to when stereo was introduced and capture the sentiment, the conversations about that changeover and see how it compares to this.
Right. I imagine people freaked out the same way.
We only need one speaker.
Well, and the other is that, the other thing that happens is you experiment. When we went from mono to stereo, look how many things that were just, pan knob going back and forth just because you could. Listen to Are You Experienced? I've said this before, but listen to Are You Experienced on headphones.
Yeah.
Make you nauseous. You should come with Dramamine pills because it's just like they're going swirling the thing back and forth. You're like, what were they thinking? But of course they were high and it was new or whatever. And it was like this new experience and let's have fun with it. It's like the Beatles. Let's just put all these things on one because we can. Now we go like, that was genius. And they're like, oh, just throw that shit out.
I think a lot of people
are just playing.
Are unaware how not involved the Beatles were in the stereo mixes that were created.
Right.
And a lot of time and effort was put into the mono mixes that the band had input on. But then the stereo stuff happened and they weren't as involved. And as a result, I find it hilarious that people chase those, let's put all the drums on the left concepts.
Right.
And that is, it's a very similar thing to Atmos experimentation and helicopters flying around in inappropriate moments in a song.
Well, this is right. This is where you go back to that. So serve the song. Does it behoove? Is it a classical record? Would you spin the tuba around like the Flaming Lips would? Probably not. Right? Making those decisions. But we're also not stuck to those things where I think I told you this. I was playing around recently and I was like, in stereo, we had physical limitations because of cutting the LPs. You had to deal with the low frequency center, high frequency splashing, just the cutting head, all of the different physical things we had to pay attention to. We don't have that in this world, in the immersive world. Although I do want to talk about bass management for a second. We'll come back to that in a second because that is affected by this a bit. But we really have no. There's no guardrails. There's no governor. You can do whatever you want. But the kick drum in the ceiling, I was playing around with that, having some fun with something, and it sounded like the upstairs neighbor was like, it's too loud, turn it down. Start a song with the kick drum up there, and then, active listening. We want to create, I think the goal is creating active listening as best we can.
Okay.
Doing things that are appropriate to make people be attentive. This isn't... Art and music, to me, is something should be paid attention to. It's not background. It's not, crickets in the background to keep people from hearing traffic.
It isn't to us.
It isn't to us. You're right.
And I think that
Good point.
Brenda, my wife, to me, does not have the same passion that we do for music. I mean, she there's music she loves, and
Yeah.
she'll want certain things playing in the kitchen when we're cooking or when we're eating or whatever. But she is a perfect example of someone who doesn't necessarily listen for the same reasons we do,
Right.
and doesn't have the same passion for it. And to some degree, that's what one of the types of people we're up against, in convincing, like, pay attention to what we're doing here.
Right. Well, she's blissfully ignorant in that she has, it's binary. She likes it or she doesn't.
Right.
That's it.
Doesn't care if it's coming out of a Google Home,
Right.
a laptop, headphones, as long as it puts her in that space of, hey, we're listening to Italian music and I'm cooking Italian food, or I don't know, I'm making shit up.
Well, this is where good engineering skills come into it. Is that balance still matters, because everything's mono at a distance.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're listening to an Atmos mix off of, you've got a full blown system in your living room or a sound bar and satellites or whatever it is, and you're in the kitchen, it's mono.
It's still mono.
So balance needs to be good.
Right.
So engineering practices, like good practices, are still important.
And before you go to the space management soapbox thing you're about to get on, I wanted to say that the argument people use when they say nobody's going to sit in the middle of a batch of speakers to get the experience, and they're never going to hear what you hear in the studio. It's the same thing for stereo. My wife's not going to sit between two speakers to get the full experience.
Right.
My point is that the complaints that people have that you have to sit in the middle of an Atmos system to get the full, experience. At the end of the day, if you want to get the full experience out of a stereo mix, you need to sit between the two speakers.
Right.
Otherwise, both situations are identical in that, as you said, at a distance, anything is mono and the balance still matters.
Right.
So, yeah, there are times when I'm mixing something in Atmos that I'll go walk out of my studio, sit on the hearth at the fireplace and stare at my phone for a minute.
Yeah. Candy Crush.
And listen to like what's coming out of the room.
Yeah.
And it's in mono.
Yeah. Well, think about how many times you've gone to somebody's house that has a stereo and, in days gone by or yesterday, whatever, that one speaker's on the floor and the other's on a shelf.
Yeah. Or one's out, or
and
they're
the
out
other
of
one's
phase.
out of phase.
Right.
Right. Polarity's off. And so, like, Atmos, one of the things I really like about it, that precious center seat, okay, that's great. And I like to sit on the couch. I actually do. I'll sit on the couch and I'll just listen. I've got a sound bar, and I test mixes and stuff as a consumer would. But I also listen to stereo the same kind of way. But the fun part, like when we do listening events, and one of the things, I was just in Denmark and teaching at a college at an event there, and got the students to walk around for 2 hours and listen. We just played music. Perception. Let's talk about, what do you hear? What do you notice? And you get people to walk around. I love listening to what's coming out of the other speakers, because you hear things, but you're also hearing the balance on the other side of the room. So thinking about balance is you're getting a forced perspective of something closer, but as you get closer at any speaker, but as you move around, you're kind of catching the balance of what's coming across the room from here to there, but then from there to here. And, it's very eye-opening as to how things fit together, how they tell the story. So as much as fun as it is to sit in the middle and listen, I recommend people get up and wander around. That's one of the things I like about the format.
Yeah. What were you going to say about bass management?
Oh, imaging stuff. Just, somebody who's mixing on headphones, like, a handful of things to be careful of, certainly LFE, bass management, stuff like that. So, I particularly, I have a philosophy. I built my room. I don't use bass management. I'm not using timing. I built the room for the speakers to be time aligned. I placed them time aligned. Everything is running full range, but I don't use any bass management, and I did that on purpose, because I think it's notable to be careful about bass management, and certainly where you bass manage. Taking low end out of the left rear speaker and having it come out of the sub, because this can only handle, moving low frequencies from here to there, now splits the imaging of that signal. Now you've got low end over here and top end over here is going to cause phasing problems in the listening area. Now take that with all of these speakers, and then you've got the low end from the top, or, because I put content in the top, it's not just reverbs. But if you've got stuff going low end in all of the speakers, and that is all being funneled to something else, your perception is being altered because you're pulling apart the frequencies of those particular instruments, and you're going to get some issues.
I got 2, potentially 3 things to address there. Number one, just to identify what bass management is. Let's say, for example, in my room, I've got PMC CI30s as all my surrounds. Those speakers were essentially built to be mounted in a wall. So they couple with the wall, and the frequency response goes down.
Right.
But in my particular case, and in many people's case, they're mounting them outside of walls.
Sweetwater does that. I was at Sweetwater, their Atmos room has PMCs, and they're those there, and they're on stands.
Yeah, exactly.
Also the ceiling, they're the same ones they're using in the ceiling too.
Yeah, a lot of people I know do that.
Yeah.
Problem is that when you do that, those speakers start to drop off around we'll just say 140, 150.
Right.
So my room is bass managed. So meaning for the listener or anybody watching who's trying to understand what the hell are they talking about, it's when you fill in what's missing from that speaker in the LFE or a sub.
Or secondary speaker.
Sub.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. The second part is I'll push back just a little bit on what you're saying. I think what you're saying in particular with your room about the imaging makes 100% sense to me.
Yeah.
However, my room is much smaller, much more compact.
Yes.
And so the time arrival of everything is not as affected by the distance. Like your rears are much further back than mine. Mine are actually, I can probably reach back maybe and touch one.
Yeah.
I might have to bend my back out of whack to do it. But so in those cases, bass management is important for me. I do have a switch on my Grace 908 to turn the bass management off.
Right.
And I don't have a separate sub to do it. The LFE and the bass management is happening on the same sub.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I need to solo something to find out like, well, how much am I sending to the LFE? That's why I have the kill switch.
Right.
So I can go, oh, that's how much kick and bass I'm sending there.
Right.
That's too much or that's too little.
Right.
So while I agree in principle, I do think that what you're stating is a unique situation to your room and maybe to bigger rooms.
Yeah.
If you've got a bigger room,
right,
this is a factor.
This isn't a don't do this thing. I was saying that from the perspective of just be aware.
Right.
And to your point is spot on, is that the size of the room matters. Location of the sub in the room also matters. If it's in front of you 20 feet away, that's a problem. If it's next to you, well, it's different. Every room is different, and the purpose of rooms are different. This goes back to knowing your room. You're absolutely right. That's what makes sense to me because of what I'm listening for and what my function is. I have to know everything that's going on because I have to know translatability and how it's going to get out there and all that kind of. Like I've got to make sure everything is right. This is the last stand.
Yeah.
And I say that for folks to be just to be aware of paying attention to low frequencies and how they're being moved around the room, and maybe where those frequencies go, and know. And then we briefly touched on the LFE, but know that if your bass management, I mean, this is kind of point number 2 on that, but know that if your bass management and your LFE, is affecting the signal before it gets to your LFE, know that channel is full range. And as soon as you make a binaural file, the bass management of your speaker system does not affect your renderer settings.
True.
And you're going to end up with things that you don't think you're hearing. And if you're not aware of it, you're going to make adjustments on the headphones that actually aren't good because you're not doing the bass management, right? I mean, does that make sense?
You're not pre-treating what's going to the LFE.
Right. So then if you make decisions on the non-pre-treated, the treated is actually going to go worse because you've done things for something that's not there in the first place.
I think we just lost 40% of the audience in that in that brief moment.
Well, for those that are still with us, this was only just pay attention. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Nothing like the only like right. The whole thing is if it works and sounds good, do it. If it doesn't, don't. Just know what you're doing and why you're doing it.
You had a prompt from Massenburg.
Well, we were talking about listening stuff. Dare I say this, because this may spark another sort of either tangent or whatever is the loudness stuff, right? We were talking about that before we got started of, loudness.
Okay.
Stereo, Atmos, loudness, whole conversation,
Right.
Books have been written.
But George's comment
was, and I love this, I think about this all the time, is that comparison is the seed of discontent.
Yes.
And as soon as you start don't lose yourself, don't lose your opinions, don't lose your perspective, your history, the knowledge you bring to something. Don't give up yourself because you just heard something against something else, and now you're comparing in a way that is potentially false equivalencies, things like that. And so what he really, I think, is trying to get across to that is that we can right away start picking things apart as soon as we compare one thing. This isn't as loud as that. This isn't as bright. This isn't as dark. Those kinds of things. But what you have to realize is that's only a question, and we have to remember that we have our history, our opinions, our everything that we've learned to get to that point for somebody to hire us to do something. Don't lose yourself in the comparison, right?
It's the Oscar Wilde thing. The Oscar Wilde quote.
Which one's that?
I think it's be yourself because everyone else is taken, or
right,
or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing.
Right. I heard Springsteen say that one time. Somebody was talking about him and people that sounded like, "What do you think about that Southside Johnny?" or what, like whatever it was when people are doing that whole, Jersey trying to come out and be like him. He's like, I just play me, and there's nobody out here to play me but me.
Right.
I am the best person to play the role of myself.
It's essentially that, and I think this is my soapbox. I love our friends over at Pyramix and Mix with the Masters and like all those things I think are great on a number of levels. But the thing that I think is problematic is we get into this business of trying to, I'm going to download Andrew Sheps's template because I want to be like Andrew. I learned long ago that I am never going to be Chad Blake as much as I love Chad. He is unique to him.
Yeah.
And it's best to cherry pick a few ideas and make your own thing. And I'll give you an outside the audio world perspective. When I was playing in bands, I remember showing up to a gig and there was a drummer, I will not name the drummer, and it was in the Bay Area, and I walked in and it was just as clear as fucking day that this guy worshiped Stuart Copeland.
Yeah.
Because the drum set, if you looked at it, you'd think, is Stuart Copeland playing tonight? And then this guy shows up and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're such a devotee of Stuart's, as am I,
right, as
a drummer. But I learned long ago as a drummer that I'm not Stuart Copeland, and I never will be.
Right.
But there's some, he's got some great things that I've stolen as a drummer.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same as audio professionals.
Absolutely. Well, it's like being a musician. You become the sum of the things you listen to, and I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think if that was because we've played together before. We were in bands together, and you as a drummer and me as a bass player showing up, and I'm trying to. My brain real quick is going like, was I at that gig? Like, who was that? And I'm trying to. So now I'm trying to process that and go back in time, way back. But as a musician, you have two options: emulate somebody exactly, or be the sum of your influences.
Yeah.
The sum of your influence is why you play a blues lick in a jazz song, or why you take things and pieces and parts and you sculpt you out of it. You just said something about Chad Blake that Eric Schilling said to me years ago, and I loved it. I repeat it all the time. He goes, Michael, you're never going to be Bob Ludwig. And he goes, I'm never going to be Bob Clearmountain.
Right.
but you're going to be you and I'm going to be me, and we're going to keep doing stuff. And I'm like, the best we can do is be the best version of ourselves and establish this is who we are. And it may be a part of each of the Bobs, and it might be a part of the Chads, and it might be a part of the Bernies, and and all the other folks in the world that we've all learned things from, but we become the sum of our parts. That was that saying, the standing on the shoulders of giants. We're all sort of the amalgamation at best is you can either emulate and polish what somebody does and be exactly like them, or you can take and be your own. And this is where that comparison thing I think to your point comes in, is that the more you kind of compare, the more if you're not careful, you end up mimicking, because your comparison, you're trying to be exactly what something else is. And you, again, lose yourself in the comparison by trying to be all something else rather than partly something else.
And I think it's okay to steal, and as you say, an amalgamation of your influences.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can spot some of those things. Like, shit, I was watching, I think it was Dune.
And sometimes it's reverence and it's a shout out, like it's intentional too.
Right,
so I don't.
Right. It's an homage to those people. I think
right.
it was the first Dune movie or the second Dune movie I was watching with my youngest son, and there was a scene where I was like, that is a direct homage to Apocalypse Now and Marlon Brando. And he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, I'll show you later. And I showed him, I was like, you see this scene where Marlon Brando's doing this thing with his face and how he's acting? And he was like, he could even see the direct comparison.
Love it. I love when people do that though.
And it's like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. I see what you're doing there. But when people just completely abandon their own identities as audio professionals to try to completely like be our friends like Andrew or people that, we've admired like Bob Clearmountain or whatever, that's when it's like, yeah, you're just a poor imitation.
Right.
I'd rather see them as true originals of themselves.
Well, and they're already out there, but there isn't you out there. So be you.
Right.
People hire you. I mean, they hire us for our opinions.
And our filter.
And our ability to communicate and our ability to understand what they're looking for and adapt and learn and grow and like all of the things. Hey, we got a problem, we got to solve it. Hey, we got to do this. Cool. I want a sound. That's not it. Figure it out. Like, those abilities, but those are also uniquely skill sets that we learn based on our experience. And people hire us for our experience. That's the point. They don't hire us for our ability to sound like somebody else. I mean, maybe they do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's tough because I think sometimes we want to just be 100% us. And sometimes being 100% us gets us rejected, because people are like, yeah, it's a little more than it's a little, what you're doing there sonically is not really 100% right. Like not everybody, like Chad Blake should not necessarily mix everybody, as much as I would love to hear the world filtered through that.
Right.
It's not appropriate for every mix.
Yeah.
And I think that where we draw the line of where we're going to push back on that is really the question. Do we go, okay, well, I could do it this way, or I could do it this way. I think it's important to try to maintain our identity in the process. But as a mastering engineer, of course, it's a bit challenging, because do you think mastering today is still the equivalent of a transfer engineer of the early Beatles era? Or is it a different game?
It's a different game. Maybe we should get back to that. As you asked me that question, I was thinking more about what you were leading up to it with. And
the train stops there.
The train stops there.
We could still stop at the other thing.
At the end of the day, we're service providers.
Right.
Right? We're here, again, our job, whether it's mastering engineer, mixing engineer, producer, our jobs as the things we do in our world are to be the liaison from the artist and the listener. And our job is, they hire us for our opinions. Sometimes it's for our opinions, and sometimes it's our lack of opinions. Sometimes it's because we can get a certain sound, or sometimes because we have an ability to work with an artist. You have a reputation of, somebody's a nice guy. Somebody's somebody that can get great drum sounds. Somebody is, awesome with vocalists, helps coach them through. Like, you get hired for reasons because of the things you bring to the table. The hard part about the comparison is also one of those things that breeds insecurity. We are also in a very insecure, field, right? I mean, the music business is rife with insecurities. I mean, that's it in every sense. And so comparison becomes one of those things to help ease our insecurities. We make things loud sometimes because it's easier to make it loud overall than it is to go back and fix the drums and do something with it. It's easy to put stuff on the master bus because, rather than dealing with the drums, it's simpler. Sometimes it's faster. Sometimes that's the sound you're looking for. A whole host of reasons. But the insecurities of the nature of our business, knowing that the artist is going to take something, for example, that we did as a mix. You do a mix, you give it to the artist, they're going to go listen to it and compare it to something that's already out because that's what they're listening to. Mm-hmm. But yours isn't done and that one is. And so what do? Well, you've got to pump it up or make it some way artificially not why you were hired, just so their comparison is less devastating to our insecurities. They're not listening to the mix. There's does the mix compare to somebody else's? Rather than going, that's what I want to say. A way, turn the mix down that you're comparing to, so at least you're listening to, apples and oranges, at least round fruit of the same size. It's not, peas and hammers. So you're having some similar experience there, but then human nature is just put on Apple Music or whatever it is, or Spotify, and then play it and see, well, my mix isn't as loud. Okay. Those insecurities drive us a lot. And so, again, it's up to us to be able to sort of plant that flag and say, you're hiring me for this. Let me tell you, this is what and then step back and say, now I'm here to serve you. I can help solve your problems, but at the end of the day, you're the client. You want it to go a certain way, and I'm here to help facilitate that. Best of my ability.
It's tough too. I mean, in these listening events that we do sometimes, I've been at listening events in Atmos here and stereo at 25th Street. And man, there's nothing more intimidating than playing something and having everybody be like, either visibly like, oh, or hearing something really great and then being like, oh,
mine's next.
Mine's next. I don't know if I'm going to compare. Yeah, we are an insecure group of people.
But see, that's the thing is that we've also societally, this is what I was going to add to that. Sorry for jumping in there for a second. But we also have become individual listeners. We put our headphones on. We sit at home. We don't get together like we used to. It used to be, as we grew up, maybe we're the get off my lawn. And, one of these days you and I will be the Liebert and Stoller or whoever. What were those guys in the balcony?
The Muppets.
The Muppet dudes.
Statler and Waldorf.
We'll be you and I will be Statler and Waldorf at some point.
I think we already are.
Yeah. The comparison thing is that we listen on headphones. We walk around on headphones. We sit in our cars and we listen by ourselves. We sit in our studios and we work by ourselves, and then we play stuff and people listen. And so when we grew up back in, the day was you would show up you go to a friend's house and bring records and play. I got this new cassette. I got this new cassette deck. I got this new turntable. I got this new album. Check this out. This band's awful. This is awesome. What do you like about that? Oh, I'm listening to the kick drum. I'm listening to the vocals. Oh, that's cool. Let's go back and listen to that again. When you have that dialogue and you share that dialogue, it also helps get rid of some of the insecurities. It's because now you've got sort of a social reflection. It's not a spin cycle. You're not going down a drain in your own world. You're out with other people and you're experiencing it. Yeah, man, I play stuff in our groups and I go like, oh, man, I hope people don't tear this apart. Or man, I felt really good about that. And man, they really ripped that one. Or I thought I nailed this and everybody liked it. Yay. There's both sides of that.
And I'm not going to, this is a train stop I will not linger on, but what you're saying about playing people stuff and interacting with people and hearing different things and getting different opinions and perspectives, it's something that directly affects the world and politically now.
Right.
People get stuck at home in their little boxes, and then they don't hear other thoughts and about other cultures or ways of doing things, and then they just go, I have this view. It's imagine an audio engineer who says, I only mix snare drums on the left.
Right. And I only want to hear records that have the snare drum on the left.
Right.
That makes your world pretty small.
Right.
right?
Right. So it's indicative of a bigger problem.
It is. Well, art leads the world. So like we're doing the same thing, demonstrating that it's not indicative of only culture and art. It's, permeates the human experience. The thing about the listening thing too, I think, is what really getting together with folks. And I talk to students about this, or anybody I can talk to. Ear training is huge. Mm-hmm. I have a few things that I do for ear training that really help me either stay in tune, be attentive, stuff like that. We've talked about one of them is going outside or just going somewhere and just sitting. Might be in a backyard, might be on a street corner or something, and just listening for sounds, identifying them. What are they? Where are they coming from? Is it big and in the distance? Is it small, close? Is it moving? What's the frequency of that plane versus that car, and which one takes over which one? At what point? And localizing and stuff. So like going out and just listening and being. The other part of that, though, is getting together and listening with other people, because you listen through their ears. And what I find that happens with all of this stuff is it raises the bar and helps us, as we should with news and society and politics and whatever stuff we want to throw out there. The more experience we have, the more you travel, the more you see the world, the more you understand what's going on, the more you have a better sort of perception about what's happening. And it raises the bar for everybody rather than digging a rut in the road. You think about all the Roman roads that had carts running up and down it, and stones with just grooves in them because they had 1,000 years of carts going over them. Like that's a rut. You drive on that road, you're going in that rut.
That's
you don't
true.
have a choice. That's the only way to get down the road. And so, the more that we can get away from some of this kind of stuff and be with other people and listen to other people, listen to styles of music you're not necessarily drawn to, just expose yourself to stuff and listen. It'll raise the bar for everybody. And then again, that makes us better at what we do as the liaison for our clients.
All good points. I've known you for a long time, and I've seen that you've worked with all different levels of clients, and now you're at a point in your career where you're working with some pretty high-level folks. So do you still work on music artists that are not as well put together as the high-level folks? And how do you deal with that? And do you ever just say, no, I don't, you got to be this tall to ride this ride kind of concept?
Yeah, I'd never say no in that sense. I mean, so I work on everything. I mean, I enjoy working on it. So my job is to help people get to, again, present themselves better when they left than they were when they came. And I look at it as a body of work, and I look at it as like trying to look at it as something to help further their career. I know what it takes to get here. Do you play golf?
No.
Yeah, all right. Anybody who plays golf, if you're out there, you play on championship masters course or whatever, it's like you're playing on carpet. You go play at a public course, you got roots and divots and, and stuff all over the place. And you got to figure out how to navigate that. We're not always playing on the best fairways and the best greens.
I see.
Sometimes you're playing on the public courses that have carts and stuff. Doesn't mean the music isn't still 3 shots or 4 shots or 5 shots to get to the hole. Still same amount of shots, still same game, still everything. It's just the path to get there. So the course may not be as smooth to get there, but the destination's still the same. So may not always get stuff. I get things that are, maybe not the best done, technically, but I work with them to try to help, like, hey, here's what I'm hearing. Can you fix this? Or if you adjust this, then I can polish it this way. Is this what you're looking for? Great. So great. Now I can go this way with it and help. There's where communication and dialogue with artists, clients is always helpful, is because then you can help understand when they see they want it more salty, they really want it more blue. Or when they say they need it more this, it's something else, and having that dialogue. So no matter how the record comes in, we're still trying to get it to where the artist wants to go. So I work with all levels, but treat them all the same, I guess is where I was trying to get to that, is that it's about their sound, not about my sound.
Everything you do, like all the decisions you make about things you put out in the world, you got to make yourself happy first.
Right. True artists are out there making themselves happy first. And writing songs, being creative, and not comparing themselves to others in that sense that I'm not good enough because, like, we live in that social media world where our best foot is always forward, and it's dangerous. Because think about kids these days. You've got kids. Like, think about the images of everything being curated and everything being perfect leaves for a lot of FOMO and leaves for a lot of inadequacies and insecurities and stuff like that. And in our entertainment, we don't need that also. We got to be careful of comparing things and not using it as a tool for embetterment or growth or learning, or even establishing that's cool, but that's just not me, so I'm not going to go that direction. Appreciate it, understand it, but don't necessarily incorporate it. Like, we have to be open-minded enough to all of this. And the things that the less open-minded we are, the more insecure we get and the more spin zone stuff we get. And music is, the best we can do is just communicate and be open to human communication and get it out there. And our job is to help facilitate that.
For me, it hits home on putting out these working class audio episodes. I talk to who I want to talk to that I feel like I can have a good conversation with.
Yeah.
And I feel like putting that out is the best way forward. So I get these like overblown emails sometimes from these managers about these people. And like, if you read the email, you'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to this person based on how they're being talked about. Like, there's a humble connection that I make with a lot of people that I realize this person's super interesting and they have something to say. Those are the people I want to talk to.
Yeah.
And so I make a conscious decision to just say, it's my show.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it this way because this is how I'm, what's the term that I just used earlier?
Master of your domain.
Wow, that's really nice. No, I'm curating. I'm curating conversations with audio professionals that I think are interesting to me and putting them out in the world. And I have to stick to that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's like if I just like bend to the whims of.
What I think you do really well, what I think is amazing, is you've started a dialogue. This isn't I don't see it as a promotion thing. I think you as facilitating the community. Like, you're bringing people together we may not hear from all the time. You're bringing in perspectives that we may not have thought about as listeners. You're bringing together a community to start to get to know the people that we hear the records for and get to understand what maybe is motivating behind them and what they do. That's just enlightenment. You're bringing what I think is an important dialogue and a way for people to learn from each other.
Well, it's a way for me to learn.
Yeah.
Because I consider myself a constant student. So
it's like going to a conference when you go to like AES or something like that, or NAMM or something. You see, like, I like watching the panelists talk to each other rather than talk to the crowd. Because I find that when somebody's learning from, like, watching somebody learn from somebody else is as important as somebody talking to you directly and you learning from them. It's different. It's like if you was getting your car, worked on, and a dealership is telling me, hey, come to us because you got to come here. And they're going, we're the best. And you say, you know what? Those people are awesome. I'm going to believe you over them because you're not directly tied to them. You're not promoting somebody else. You're just saying, like, this is, yeah. So I'm going to believe you.
A long story short, I think what we're saying is be yourself and put that forward. And it goes back to your George Massenburg quote about, what was the quote?
Comparison is the seed of discontent.
Yes.
The thing is, we have to also remember it's okay to fail. It's okay to make a bad mix and go, like, I've lost gigs. I've lost stuff where I'm like, man, I thought that was great. And I've done stuff where I'm like, man, I totally missed that.
Yeah.
But you learn and you grow, and it's okay to put it out there. This is where, back to the immersive world, this is where the fun is. This is what I hope that people are taking from this is an opportunity with a brand new format to play.
Yeah.
Go play. Be a kid. Move stuff around. Don't move stuff around. Play with delays. Play with stuff. Like, just have fun. And you'll see that some things will start to come into focus, like this works and this doesn't work. And the more that you do that, the more you're sort of stretching your boundaries. And that's just best for everybody.
Yeah.
everybody they work with, everybody that listens to that. So let's have fun. It should be fun.
Well, speaking of fun, let's wrap up our conversation and do a tour of your room here.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.